It's absolutely wonderful to see you today. Carole, how are you?
Very well indeed, thank you.
Fantastic. I do feel we're sort of hair twins, aren't we? We're both blonde and bubbly, aren't we? We can say that.
A lot of it.
And a lot of it. Brilliant,
Yes,
brilliant.
yes.
We could be sisters, actually. We do
We
look very
could,
similar.
we could.
Yeah. So anybody listening on the podcast won't know what we're talking about. You'll have to go and have a look at the videos. Carole, I want to talk to you about a topic that's very close to my heart because it's something that I struggle with, and I'm going to use this as a bit of a session to help me too. What would you say is the difference between pressure and stress?
Well, Maria, that's first of all, thank you for the invitation. Second of all, that's very simple. Pressure is what gets you up in the morning. Pressure is what you can manage. Pressure is good for you. Pressure is within your control. So what is stress? Very simply, stress is too much pressure. When you're out of control, you can't cope, everything's going on around you, you feel like you're a passenger in this car, you just can't manage what is going on. So in simple words, pressure is good for you, stress is not. Now, a lot of people think that a little bit of stress is good for them, but it's not. It's not just semantics, it's very simply saying pressure is good, stress is not. Stress is too much pressure. You do not want to be in the stress zone.
That's really interesting, actually. I hadn't thought about it that way. Do you think that we overuse the word stress?
I think we do, because in our vocabulary, it's a bit like the word depression as well. How are you? I feel depressed. How are you? I'm stressed. Well, are you really stressed? Are you really unable to cope? Can you really not manage your day? Well, no, I can, but we're just really, really busy. Well, it's almost like the word busy is also overused. So I think the word stress is overused. People don't really necessarily know the definition of it, but it sounds like, how are you? I'm stressed. It's just almost like, hello, how are you? Stressed? How are you? Busy? It's almost like it happens all the time.
That's true, actually. Apart from in America, I interviewed an American for the last podcast, and he was like so happy and everything was wonderful. We Brits would say I'm okay, or yes, I'm stressed, or I'm busy. I'm a Brit now. I'm Italian Brit. So I mean, I've been around a while, and for me, I feel I've had pressure and stress all my life. Do you think that the causes of stress have changed over time?
I think they have. Well, I mean, if you only got to go back to say even to during the World War, then people were experiencing post-traumatic stress. Now, yes, if we go back, say 10 years ago, we didn't have as much tech as we have now. So therefore, as we well know, both you and I know only too well, that tech causes a lot of stress, or can cause a lot of stress. It's amazing, amazing tool. I can speak to you like this. I can speak to Australia in 20 minutes time. All of that is brilliant. So are there greater stresses on us now? Yes, there are greater stresses on us now, but they're different. They're different. They're not in the war years. We are in 2022. And I would say that there are greater stressors, whether it's for you individually, or whether you're working in industry.
Okay. And you touched on this, but I suspect there's more than one cause of stress. You touched on the fact that if we put too much pressure on ourselves, it becomes stress. What are the other causes of stress?
Internal demands, external demands, people expecting too much of you, not sleeping at night, that sort of builds on itself, not going to bed at night sufficiently early enough and then wondering why you're so tired the next day, or shall I say exhausted the next day. So there's all sorts of pressures, whether it's if you're home working, there can be pressures. If you're actually going to work, there can be pressures there. And you're going to the workplace, there can be pressures there as well. So right across the board, it can be family, it can be individual, it can be work pressures. So it's, do you know what it's called, Maria? It's called life and it's called living. And we have to learn how to manage our daily activities.
Yeah, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, yeah, I need to start going to bed earlier. And yes, I'm not sleeping as much as I should. And I've got a bit of stress at the moment, a bit of pressure. We're planning a wedding and it's very soon. And you suddenly realize how close it is. So I'm trying to keep calm, So tell me, maybe you can probably read some of my symptoms, but what are the symptoms to look out for to see if a colleague maybe is stressed, or maybe that you might be experiencing stress?
The same for a colleague as it is for yourself. So therefore, it could be the person has low self-esteem, not concentrating, increased accidents, just not making time for themselves. They are always stressed. They are always rushing here, there, and everywhere. Behavioral changes, we usually say how the person usually gets exaggerated when they get stressed. So the person who's quiet and quite withdrawn will become quieter and more withdrawn. And the person who is an extrovert will become even more extrovert. So it's really looking out for those signs and symptoms. And Maria, the signs and symptoms certainly are there. The only question is, do people do anything about it? And frequently people say, well, yes, I noticed it. I thought it would go away. I'm just stressed out for a short period of time. So therefore it wasn't going to make any difference. It's really going to be, I can manage. And then all of a sudden, the tiredness becomes exhaustion. And after exhaustion, it's a very quick, slippery slope to burnout. And if you think you can't burn out, you're not going to burn out. And that's what most people say before they burn out. It's not going to happen to me. And that's what they're saying. Chances are it can happen to anybody, anytime and anywhere.
Oh, wow. That's and you know the piece that you mentioned that was a bit worrying to me. I would never have thought that somebody who is naturally quiet, who becomes quieter, is stressed. It wouldn't have occurred to me, or that somebody who's an extrovert becomes more extroverted. I wouldn't have associated that with stress at all. So that's interesting. So I may not be aware of people around me who might be stressed. That's interesting. Really interesting.
You've got people who experience too much work. That's the usual pictures that you see people holding their head. They can't manage too much work. They don't appreciate that actually too little work can also cause stress. Because if it's got too little work and that's not being managed in the workplace, that can bring about boredom. And if you're bored, you're not concentrating. If you're bored, you don't feel valued. Your self-esteem goes down. And then you can't wait for the minutes to tick away before you get to the end of the day. So people don't necessarily appreciate that you've got boredom on the one side, and on the other side, you've got too much work to do. So it's too little and too much. So for anybody listening to this and watching this, to be aware for their colleagues to look out for some of those signs and symptoms.
That's really, really helpful. So you said that it's a slippery slope and it's quite easy to go to burnout, even though you think you won't burn out. Is there a way of identifying that you might burn out? Is there a sign that says, okay, hang on, stop?
There is a sign. There are the signs of like when you wake up in the morning and instead of feeling refreshed after a good night's sleep, you wake up in the morning and you're every bit as tired as when you went to bed at night. So that you're just not recharging your batteries. You're just not getting any energy back. You're pushing yourself, you're burning out. You literally are burning out. And when you get to the point of burnout, and even though you may think it's never going to happen, I am going to beat the system, or do you know something? You can't and you won't. So people who do burn out think they're probably going to go back to where they were, and actually they can't and they won't, and actually nor should they, because where they were and what they were doing is what was causing the burnout. So therefore they shouldn't go back to where they were. So if they're working in the workplace, then that person comes back into work. You need to very carefully look at what they were doing, do a risk assessment on their job. Were they managing? Were they not managing? Also looking as to whether there were any home stressors that were creating that as well. So stress is cumulative. There is the last straw, there always is. But people usually say things like, I'm not going to burn out, I'm going to beat the system, because that's a sign of the arrogance as well. And together they can't bear the thought that they're not going to be able to cope. But actually when they get to burnout, they very often end up under the duvet, could be for 3 months or 6 months, they actually cannot manage.
Wow. 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 So you may well be feeling it, that you're feeling too stressed, too much pressure. You may feel on the edge. Somebody may not notice because, just like me, I wasn't aware of the signs to look for. And it might still be difficult, though, to actually go to a manager or a colleague and say, look, I'm feeling stressful, because there's still a little bit of a stigma around that, isn't there? It's sort of like, especially in these high pressure jobs where you're expected just to keep going and make it. Do you think it's improved? Can we talk more openly about these things, or do we still have a long way to go?
You're right that there's still the stigma. It is still a stigma to say something and talk about mental health. It's getting better. There's no question of that. It is getting better. People are speaking up and speaking out more than they were. However, and here is the however is many people still see it as a black mark against them. Many people still think that if they go to personnel, that they will think that they can't cope and it's a sign of weakness. Many people still think as well that if they say something, then quite honestly, if there's a career opportunity, career progression, they may not be chosen. So even though, and I've been working in the field for many, many years, as you know, even though it is getting better, and there is a greater profile. We have Stress Awareness Week, we have Mental Health Day, Mental Health Week. It's getting better. But those weeks and those individual days are very important, but not just for those individual days and weeks, but right throughout the year, so that people feel confident to actually be able to speak up and speak out and say, I am feeling stressed. And for the organization to say simple words, how can I help you? And for that to be acceptable. So what we're looking at is the culture of the organization to listen carefully and take action.
I like that. Thank you so much. You say, it's not a day, it's every day. You have to be aware, you have to be, aware and listen and open to it. But actually you set up an International Stress Awareness Day way back in 1998 when you were a mere child. What was the need to do so at that point? Why was it so important to have a day? And what day is it, by the way?
Okay, it's the first Wednesday every year in November. So it's a different day every year. It's a different day every year. So the first Wednesday in November. And I was working alongside the executive of the International Stress Management Association, which is a mental health and stress charity. And I came up with this idea at a committee meeting and said, why don't we have an awareness day? Now, at that time, there were no awareness days. I'm not quite sure how it popped into my head, but it did. And they said, great, you go for it. And I said, well, what's my budget? And of course, the answer was nothing. We got sponsorship, we managed it. Fast forward, we are now 22 years in. So have things changed from 1998? They have and they've not. I've got to say it's a combination. The day now on its 20th anniversary in 2018 then became a week, and we are now international. Is it needed? Unfortunately, yes, it is. Or shall I say, fortunately, it is, because it gives us an opportunity to speak up and to speak out. Because stress, realistically, Maria, is not going to go away. It's not. The only question is, how do we manage that? And that comes down to what can you learn? What can you do? What education's available? What apps are available? Listen, do, speak up and speak out, and ask for help. There is plenty of help around now as and when you need it.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I had no idea there was so much to understanding stress. I can see your expertise and hear it. It's really, really useful. Tell me, what can people do to help themselves to reduce stress and build resilience? What can I do to relax a little bit with regards to my planning?
Well, you're going through a wedding, so it's one of the top stressors. It really is. But the wedding will then be over. So the thing is that if there's a particular point going on in your life, like there is getting married, it is stressful leading up to it. But then after that, you should then be able to come back to where you were, so back to that level of norm. If the body is on that tension the whole time, it's not going to be able to manage. It needs to tense, it needs to relax. It needs to tense, it needs to relax. So therefore, if really after your wedding you're still stressed, you better call me. But realistically, what I'm saying is that be aware of what's going on in your body. Your body is a phenomenal machine. Look after it, manage it. Eat well, exercise regularly, simple things that you say, yeah, I know all that, Carole. I know we all know it, but there's the only question is, do we all do it? Not necessarily so, because things get in the way and you've got stuff to do on your desk, etc., etc. Take control and manage it. Look out for the signs of stress, be aware of those signs, and take action to do something about it as and when you need to.
Okay, I need to prioritize those things, because I think if you don't prioritize them, they do get pushed to the side and something else becomes more important. You are absolutely right. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. If anybody does need your help, Carole, where can they get hold of you? What's the best point of contact?
You can use my website, which is carolespearsgroup.co.uk. If you want the charity website, it's isma.org.uk.
Thank you. And thank you so much for all that advice. I'm going to be listening to this again and I'm going to be taking it on board. I'll let you know how I get on. Hopefully, if I call you after the wedding, it will be to say everything's wonderful and I'm back to normal rather than anything else.
Look forward to hearing from you again.
Wonderful. And thank you everybody for listening to Speaking Business Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure you leave a rating on Apple Podcasts. But even better, tell your friends, share it, help somebody who might be feeling a bit of stress today. And until next time, I will be waiting to see you. Maria Franzoni here. Bye-bye.